Let's summarize the plot of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater and explain where each individual path leads in the ongoing franchise without spoiling too much about the ultimate conclusions. As I've said before, the Snake Eater mission is like the genesis of Metal Gear Solid, the game from which all storylines develop right until the conclusion in Metal Gear Solid 4. It starts out as a simple mission, but when events unfold, the different characters are sent on different, sometimes opposing paths. The big problem going forth for everybody was the fact that Colonel Volgin did not only accept the mobile nuke from the boss when she supposedly defected, but that he actually used them, starting an international crisis between the two superpowers. That event leads to the main storyline, the mission. Just to recite, Operation Snake Eater is about 3 different objectives. Number 1, Volgin is pushing for insurrection in the Soviet government, and obviously the current chairman Khrushchev wants to stop that from happening. Thus, he demands the United States to take care of the mess. 2, the United States need to wipe their hands clean of the entire affair and make a superficial peace with the Soviets, so they need to eliminate their former operative, the boss, and her also defected Special Forces unit, the Cobras. Number 3, the third mission objective is something the US government wants out of the whole affair. In the arms race and space race with the Soviet Union, they need qualified scientists, and they deem Sokolov a true trump card. Major Zero personally is very much involved with this because he staged his first defection already. Sorry for being so late, remember that was the message to be given by Snake to Sokolov. This rounds up the mission in itself, but during the course of the mission, Snake encounters an entirely different agenda: the Philosopher's Legacy. In order to understand this branch of the story, we will first uncover what it actually is. Basically, it's money, but where did it hail from? It originated during the First World War, with different nations funding money in a big pool to finance the war and the ongoing weapons development. During World War II, it was greatly expanded to fight the Axis powers. The nations investing in it were the United States of America, the Soviet Union, and China, which coincidentally later in the real world become the 3 actual superpowers. So basically, the Philosopher's Legacy is just an endless fund of money raised by 3 nations to fuel their war efforts. In charge of managing the money was a Soviet officer, which is Volgin's father. After the war ended, the question is, how is the money distributed? Naturally, every nation would take its share from it and be happy. That would be logical, but since the 3 superpowers themselves were only allies in terms of time, especially the United States and the Soviet Union, who were opposing forces even during the Second World War, would never be able to solve this mess. Volgin Sr. moved quick and hid the money all over the world in all kinds of funds, depots, and papers he could to make it basically vanish into thin air. Only he knows where the money is, and therefore he could use it himself. Our antagonist Volgin inherits the fund and uses the money to raise his own branch of weapons development, loyal soldiers inside the Soviet Union, and political influence in order to shape the Soviet Union the way he feels it should. During the story of Metal Gear Solid 3, we find out that all 3 countries involved want to get their hand on the money, naturally, and they send agents to retrieve the film, the actual Philosopher's Legacy, which marks all transactions from Volgin's father, thus unlocking the hidden gold pot, if you will. So the Philosopher's Legacy itself is just the film, not the money. Volgin is the Soviet side to this whole ordeal. The United States government sends out the boss to infiltrate Volgin's ranks and retrieve the Philosopher's Legacy for the United States. However, her mission fails when they underestimate Volgin's brutal, sadistic, and egotistical nature. As we find out in the end, the other agent looking for it is actually Eva, Tatiana, whatever her name is, in duty to the People's Republic of China, who want to use the fund to raise themselves to the same status as the United States and the Soviet Union. This might sound complicated, but it really is not when you break it down to its core elements. The legacy is an endless pot of money funded by the United States, the Soviet Union and China. When World War II ends, they not only want their share back, but the entire thing. Because nations can't just be nice to each other, which seems factual when we look at things today. Whose hands does it end up in though? The wild card, of course, Ocelot, retrieves the real film. Now we come to the last ongoing plot point from Metal Gear Solid 3. On a personal note, I think the third story branch is the most important because moreover than the ongoing storyline about secret societies and war economy, nanomachines and such, which are all excellent components to add and give the game's larger meaning and message, the true focus and importance with these games lies with the characters, especially the two heroes themselves. Thus, to me personally, the main story is Big Boss's downfall. Now, the entire story in Snake Eater, Peace Walker and Phantom Pain deals with this. When you know the series, you went into Snake Eater knowing that Big Boss ends up a bad guy in the end of the series. But when you play through it and you see the end, it completely changes the story. The character of Big Boss in this game is just perfectly done, giving him so many layers, so much depth, so much more understanding as to what happened to this individual man during his life for him to become a villain, which is debatable in itself, but all in time. In Metal Gear Solid 3, we meet Big Boss for the first time as a young soldier totally devoted to the United States and his mission. He is a rather smug person, very sure of his abilities, and he also has a hint of a rebellious stride, which is just perfect for the time in the 60s, because society was being rattled back then with various forms of rebellion in the Western world, like the hippie movement, Martin Luther King, just to name two examples. He's not a person who takes orders lightly, as depicted in the first cutscene with a cigar.
Hey, are you deaf?
He said put out the cigar and put on your mask.
Still, he is committed to the cause.
I follow the president and the top brass. I'm ready to die for them if necessary.
Then Snake is suddenly hit by lightning when he is confronted by the boss via radio.
Jack, is that you? How many years has it been?
Boss?
That's right. It's me.
Which immediately makes us question his nature again. The way he speaks to her with such devotion, sadness, and love, is that a villain talking? Or, for that matter, somebody insubordinate? His downfall begins when he learns of the boss's apparent defection and he is shaken up completely, made worse by the fact that every time he faces her, she confuses him further by questioning his beliefs.
Why'd you defect?
I didn't. I'm loyal to the end, to my purpose. What about you, Jack? What's it going to be? Loyalty to your country or loyalty to me? Your country or your old mentor? The mission or your beliefs? Your duty to your unit or your personal feelings?
Basically, she is pointing out that he is faithless and doesn't have true conviction. She tells him flat out that he is wrong, he doesn't follow the orders given by the military because he himself doesn't want to kill the boss. That is why he fails time and time again whenever he fights her during the course of the game. It's not that he can't, but he fights the mission internally. Yes, she is a better fighter than him, but is she a better soldier? Someone supposed to be better than the legendary soldier we've heard about throughout, at least 3 games, who was so goddamn good that they cloned him? That is weird, isn't it? Snake then takes out the Cobras with relative ease, which ultimately contradicts his inability to overcome the boss. When all the Volgan business is dealt with, Snake has to make a choice. The boss basically leaves him no option but to fight her, so he has to make the decision to kill her. At first, he can kind of deal with it, since he ends up sleeping with Eva at the end of the game, like nothing happened. But then reality hits him hard. He learns of Eva's true identity as a spy for China, and he learns the truth about the boss, which is that she didn't defect in truth, but was on a mission herself. When the mission failed, she knew full well what would happen to her, but being loyal to her country, she played her part and sacrificed herself for the greater good. The United States government sent Snake to kill her, knowing full well that they are the ones who botched this. And then, one of the best scenes in this series happens that just rips me up from inside every time I see it.
Snake, listen to me. She didn't betray the United States. No. Far from it. She was a hero who died for her country. She carried out her mission knowing full well what was going to happen. Self-sacrifice. Because that was her duty.
You are above even the boss. I hereby award you the title of Big Boss. You are a true patriot.
The worst thing about the scene is they are all smiling, all acting like everything is great, tapping his shoulders, going, "Well done, mate," saying he's a true patriot. All that right on the heels of being betrayed by Eva, who he does end up liking and trusting during the end. It must seem like mockery to him. His face during the entire sequence says it all. There's just no emotion in him, just anger, amped up by the fact that he lost his freaking eye for a stupid cover-up operation that was essentially about money. When he visits the boss's grave, he must be thinking about all her lessons she's given him during the time before the mission and during it. He once says to her, "You never taught me how to think like a soldier." The boss's answer was, "You need to find that yourself." However, the boss does confront him with a couple of insights into what she believes a soldier should be like. Her last will, if you want. The problem is that Snake, after all this heartbreak and betrayal, doesn't have an answer yet. He just feels revulsion towards governments in general that make soldiers play their parts with no thought whatsoever to their lives. He feels like soldiers are just tools of the governments. So instead of making up his own beliefs, he inherits just one part of the boss's will, which we will discuss in another video. Snake, now awarded the title of Big Boss, meaning superior to the boss, which must feel like another mockery to Snake and also a disgrace to her legacy, decides to split from the military and the government itself. pursuing his own quest from now on with an army without a nation that takes on operations they deem worthy. So, to discuss the title, is this the story of Big Boss's downfall? Yes and no. In the grander scheme of things and through worldwide perception in the universe of Metal Gear, it starts here, but from a personal standpoint, this is not a downfall of his character. Big Boss rebels against the current system of superpowers and their treatment of soldiers and the world in general. That is not something an evil villain person does, but rather the trait of a hero to not accept the world as it is now, but rather to fight its injustice in his own way. Now, I'm just quickly going to roll out the next events in the universe that trigger through the events of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Big Boss's downfall storyline obviously leads to Peace Walker, in which a big component of the story is how Big Boss builds his army without a nation, which is a predecessor to the infamous and legendary Outer Heaven, the place where the very first Metal Gear on MSX, a Konami console from Japan, is set. The Philosopher's Legacy branch of the story leads to maybe the most important event in the entire franchise. Since Ocelot, the actual double agent in Snake Eater, retrieves the Philosopher's Legacy, it goes back to the United States. But who gets it? Who uses the money? The answer is surprising, and also I find it a bit strange, but the money ends up in the hands of Major Zero, the voice in our ear throughout Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, the man in charge of our operation. What he does with this is form a secret society called Cypher, a network of spies and influence without governmental overwatch that later in the span of the series becomes the automated Patriots. The creation of the Patriots leads to all kind of events in the universe of Metal Gear, but is also directly related to the final act of Peace Walker and the events from the Outer Heaven incident. We will go into detail on all those follow-up plots when the time comes to discuss them in the order of the games. I hope you now have an idea of the general storyline from Metal Gear Solid 3, its characters, and the paths they follow going further. Thank you for your time, and as always, please subscribe if you liked this episode about the lore and the story of the Metal Gear Solid franchise, and please ask if anything seems unclear. Give feedback whichever way you feel, and also feel free to set some things right you feel I have explained in a wrong way. So I hope to see you again on this channel, and I hope you had fun with this little video about the lore.